Rediscovering Advent, preparing our hearts for Christmas. We talked about hope, preparation, joy, love in week 5. Today I'd like, the title today is The Arrival. And this will be my last video on the subject of Advent. And next week is already Christmas. I'm not sure if I mentioned it earlier, but Advent means the coming. And you can almost see it in the French word vient, from venir, which means to come. I called my devotional The Arrival, which kind of sounds like one of the Mandalorian episodes. And yes, I've been watching The Mandalorian with my son. For those of you who don't know what that is, just forget what I just said and let's get back to Advent. For this final episode, I want to read from John chapter 1, verse 14. The Word became flesh and made his dwelling among us. We have seen his glory, the glory of the one and only Son who came from the Father, full of grace and truth. The first issue that this verse brings up, I've already spoken about actually in my sermon titled Christmas Face to Face, and you can check that out on this YouTube channel. In that sermon, I talk about the question of whether or not people really saw the face of God or not when they looked at the face of Jesus. Or was Jesus a baby, like any baby? When it says that the Word became flesh, did he give up being God in order to become human? The answer, of course, is no. And that same position has been held since the Gospels were written, and every church council or official Christian theological debate since then. So Philippians, again, a review, Philippians chapter 2, verse 6 and 7, who being in very nature God did not consider equality with God something to be used to his own advantage. And that is speaking of his motive or his purpose, the purposes of Jesus in coming. I continue, rather he made himself nothing. He made himself nothing. How did he do that? The passage tells us how. He made himself nothing by taking the very nature or form of a servant, taking upon himself. In other words, his deity was many times veiled as he took upon himself human form. There is an adding and not a taking away from the nature of Christ, an adding to, right? So we're not talking about him taking away the deity in order to become human, but rather he's adding to himself the nature of a human being, and by so doing veils at times his deity. So the incarnation of Christ is in no way takes away from his deity. Hark, the herald angels sings. Of course, you know the Christmas carol. And the third verse goes like this: Christ by highest heaven adored, Christ the everlasting Lord. Late in time, behold him come, offspring of the Virgin's womb, veiled in flesh, the Godhead see. See, not as in see with your eyes, but see as in the authority of a king. So the see, so veiled in flesh, the Godhead see. Hail the incarnate deity. John chapter 14, verses 8 to 10 says, Lord, show us the Father. One of the disciples that asked Philip, that's asking Jesus, Lord, show us the Father, and that will be enough for us. And Jesus answered, don't you know me, Philip, even after I've been among you such a long time? Anyone who has seen me has seen the Father. How can you say, show us the Father? Don't you believe that I am in the Father and that the Father is in me. So that was the first issue that I wanted to talk about in relation to John chapter 1, verse 14. The second issue of this verse is about the one and only Son who came from the Father. The one and only Son who came from the Father. What does the Father and Son relationship mean here? And I find that there's often confusion when people read in to the text all kinds of ideas in reference to the Father and Son relationship. So is the Son less than the Father? Did the Father exist before? Or did the Father exist before the Son? Or are we talking here about two gods, or is it just one God? And these are questions that you really need, as a Christian, you need to grapple with these questions. But you need to start in your grappling, all right? You need to start with what the Bible says. And I would suggest that especially that you start with what Jesus himself says. Look what John chapter 5, verse 23 says. He who does not honor the Son does not honor the Father. It's Jesus himself who says that your attitude towards the Father is your attitude towards the Son. And so if you talk to him, it's the same thing as talking to me. If you talk to the Father, then you're talking to me. So, when you take a look at the context of some of these passages, you will see that many times the Jews tried to kill Jesus for such statements, just saying that he was the Son, of the Father in that relationship, because he was claiming equality with God. And that's really what the terminology was focused on. So when the New Testament uses this Father-Son terminology, it's all about the Son being all that the Father is. Another thing that the Son refers to is his function. His function. So to talk about essence and function is two very different things. So essence is the nature of Christ, which we were just talking about a minute ago. It's not the same thing as talking about function, what he came to do, right? So when we talk about the Son, when we talk about Jesus, we're clearly talking about what Jesus came to do. So Jesus claimed, in essence, equality with God. And you can look up John chapter 5 and John chapter 10, and there's lots of passages in the Gospel of John that talk about that. But to get over the Christology this morning, the last thing I'd like to mention in relation to John chapter 1, verse 14, and the Advent, is that Jesus came full of grace and truth. The verse says that he came full of grace and truth. Do you feel today as though you have the favor of God? Well, whether you feel like it or not, you do. The birth of Jesus declares that you have the favor or the grace of God. So it's one thing to get a like, on Facebook you get a like. It's one thing to get a like from someone you hardly know or you hardly care about, but to receive favor from God himself. But it's grace that comes with truth. It says that it was that Jesus came full of grace and truth. So that grace comes with truth. Truth about himself, and we talked a little bit about who Jesus said he was, and there's so much to say about that. But certainly, if Jesus was God, then he is holy. He is creator. He knows all things and has a purpose for everything that he does, and he has a purpose for all things. So, truth about himself. And there's also truth about who we are. who we are, that we are sinful, that we are not holy, that we are not the creator, but the created, often lost without purpose or hope. But in Jesus, because of the birth of Jesus, because of his coming, we can have hope and victory and freedom over sin and death, because Jesus has come. O come, all ye faithful, joyful and triumphant. O come ye to Bethlehem. O come and behold him, born the King of angels. Come, let us adore him. Oh, come, let us adore him. Let us adore him, Christ the Lord. I want to take this opportunity to wish you a Merry Christmas, you and your family. And remember, Christ is born. Christ has come for us. Lord bless you.